Greetings everyone, I'm Record the Second, and welcome to the first video on the new mob tweaks update version 1.2 geared up for Mayhem. This is going to be the name of the update, and obviously it's going to be a port for mods of Mayhem, but also it's going to have a bunch of really cool new features that I cannot wait to show you. In this video, I'm just showing you the first major part of the update, but I'm going to make at least 2 more videos, maybe even 3 more videos about the other upcoming features that I'm going to be working on, so stay tuned for that. But first, let's get to the main topic of this video, and I rebalanced a lot about the drowned mob, but it's also part of a larger system which I will explain throughout the video. Obviously the focus is on the drowned, so let me at first show you what I changed about their inventory. The basic conceit of the update is that I wanted mobs to match your strength a little bit more, because we've gotten a lot of overpowered new items such as netherite equipment, we've gotten maces, we've gotten spears, but the mobs have stayed pretty much the same. So there's been a power creep issue in my opinion, so I think the mobs need to match that a little bit. I also think that it needs to be fair, so it's not like all the mobs everywhere are constantly geared up and extremely powerful for you. I think it will depend on the zone. The basic premise is that the deeper you go, the harder it is to fight the enemies, and I think it scales very nicely. I'm going to be showing you that concept a bit more in detail later with a lot of the other mobs that I have here, but first let's start with the drowned. So we know that drowned can spawn in dripstone caves naturally, and it can also spawn in rivers. So I changed a little bit about what they're going to be spawning with. Let's spawn a few drowned and see what they have. So as you can see now, a lot of them have fishing rods, even more than vanilla. They have chances to get some armor on them. They have copper armor, leather armor, and chainmail armor. They also even have sometimes really cute drip leaves on their head. Let me find one. That guy has a drip leaf on his head. I think it looks extremely natural and really cute. We're in the river biome, so that's what they have on them. Mostly fishing rods, and sometimes they have a chance to get spears and even swords. But this is a shallow area in the world, so they only have very low tier stuff. But it's already more interesting to fight these guys than in vanilla, because the spears have a really far reach, and even though drowned do not know how to charge spears and use them at their most effectiveness, the jabbing does a lot of the work because they can reach you farther, so it creates a more interesting dynamic in terms of fighting these guys. Now they're still pretty easy, but like I said, this is a shallow area of the world and they do not have really strong stuff that will come later. Another thing that is consistent with this system that I constructed for all of these mobs is that the deeper you go, the more likely they are to have enchanted gear, and the higher the enchantments on the gear will be level-wise. This system is actually incredibly complex, and there are a lot of additional things that it does, but this is the base of what the feature offers. And I think it's a really cool thing to see that all the mobs, they have become more unique, they're more likely to have stuff on them, and you will have more fun dealing with these enemies. So I thought scaling the mobs' abilities and strength with the player was the natural way to go with this data pack, especially considering the stuff we got in Mounts of Mayhem. One more thing I want to show you specifically is what happens to drowned that spawn with tridents. So this is not in an ocean biome, so it's still considered a shallow area. There's a guy with a trident, and as you just saw, it got replaced with a fishing rod. So they'll just re-roll the chance for their main hand equipment when they have a trident in the river biome, which is where they naturally spawn, because I just thought it's really ridiculous that in early game you can get such an incredibly strong enemy to fight. So I've actually changed it to make drowned only drop tridents in deep ocean biomes. Now you will know where to go to find your trident, and you will no longer be sniped by overpowered enemies when you're early in the game. And you might think that I made tridents extremely rare, and I actually addressed that problem as well. Because if you do get a trident wielding drowned, they have a 50% chance to drop their trident. It is significantly higher than in vanilla, and that way I think it creates a much more balanced experience. Now let me show you what happens when they spawn in a dripstone cave. So in this data pack, there's a sophisticated system of detection for caves. It's not perfect, but it does the job. And what happens to the drowned that spawn in here is a little bit different. Instead of fishing rods, they will have pickaxes. And this is a regular cave, but it'll still work in the dripstone caves because it covers pretty much all the caves in the game with this in-cave detection that I made for the data pack. So that's approximately what you can expect. And also, since this is in a cave, it equips the zombies differently too. I'll show you that more in a bit. But first, let's find an ocean, and I'll show you what these guys have in regular ocean biomes. Here we are in a different world in an ocean biome. I will show you these guys in the next video. For now, let's talk about the regular drowned. We're going to move into a warm ocean biome, and we're going to see that they have slightly better equipment than they do in the rivers and dripstone caves. So on average, the equipment is going to be a bit better. They no longer have drip leaves. Now they also have a chance to have iron equipment at this depth, but this is still regular oceans. There are no tridents, just spears and swords. One more thing I wanted to explain is that according to Minecraft history, as we know from archaeology, the ancient societies that eventually became the drowned, or so is the implication judging by the ocean ruins, is that in the warm oceans they were fishermen, and in the cold oceans they were more warriors. So in all the cold ocean biomes, or just even the regular ocean biomes, because they generate the cold ocean ruins, you will have drowned. If they spawn with fishing rods naturally, this is considered a cave because we're in a lush cave, so I'm just going to go here again. That's just how the system works. If they spawn with a fishing rod baseline in the warm ocean that we are in, they're going to keep the fishing rod. But if we go to a cold ocean, they're going to get the fishing rod removed, and they will have a chance to get either a sword or a spear, matching the pottery shards. So that's how in-depth I went for the system, and I think it adds a lot to the world of Minecraft and to history. I think it really complements vanilla in that way. Now we are in a deep ocean, and let me show you what happens. So the tridents that will be naturally given to drowned through vanilla spawning will be maintained. They will not be replaced, and there's also an additional 5% chance from mob tweaks that they will also get a trident on top if they don't have anything in their hand. So that guy was a natural spawn. Let me see if this guy drops his trident or not. And as you can see, he dropped a trident. So it's not even that hard to get tridents, but you just need to know where to get them. And again, these guys are more geared up, so I think it really works. I don't think the trident needs to be this extremely rare weapon that you have to grind so hard to get through random chance. I like this much more, and I think it works better. These guys also have a chance to get spawned with diamond equipment, so they're really strong compared to the surface or shallow ocean counterparts that they have. They also have a chance to spawn with turtle helmets, which is pretty fun. But here's a guy with a trident again. Let me see if that guy drops his trident or not. That guy, not so much. But what about this dude over here? He has a turtle shell. Let me see if he drops. Yeah, he did drop the trident. So it's a 50-50% chance. Way better than it is vanilla. I think it's a fantastic change to trident balancing in vanilla, and just makes fighting drowned more fun and more fair at the same time. Also, as I said before, not only are the chances for equipment to be enchanted going up as we go down, the enchantments themselves get better as we get lower. So the ocean enchantments are decent, but the deep ocean enchantments are really good. Let me see if this copper sword will prove what I'm saying. Yeah, it's a very high enchantment. It's not the best because it's Bane of Arthropods, but it's a lot of different enchantments and higher level enchantments as well. And that's basically the drowned in a nutshell, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. I have worked this system out for other undead mobs in the game as well as piglins. There are also even some changes for raids, so let me show you right now what those look like. So we have something specific for the land zombie mobs, and that includes the husk and the zombie. It does not include the zombie villager because I thought that since the villagers get zombified, they shouldn't have a lot of gear on them because they are former villagers after all. But since these guys are former ancient builders or whatever we're supposed to call them, they should have a lot of armor and stuff that they're wearing, right? So let's go to the surface and see what these guys can spawn with on the surface. So here we are, and let's spawn a few husks just to make sure they don't burn in the sunlight, but the drops are the same even for the zombies, so don't worry about that. These guys can spawn with carved pumpkins, leather armor, copper armor, and chainmail armor on the surface. Also, if they spawn with iron shovels, which they do in vanilla, those will instead be replaced with golden shovels because iron is considered a deeper equipment tier. So I made a slot in for gold because gold is not that represented in my system, but here it is for this specific case. Let me also show you what happens with the zombie horse jockey. They also get golden spears instead of iron spears, so I think it's a good change. But there are also some specific biome changes that I made that I will show you in the nearby forest biome. So in all the wooded biomes, the taigas, mega taigas, savannas, even in some additional foresty mountain biomes, basically anywhere there are a lot of trees, these mobs will spawn with something specific. So I have a command block here to just spawn a guy with an iron shovel, and they will instead get replaced with axes, and these axes are randomized, so it's not just going to be the same. Sometimes they don't have anything, sometimes it's a copper axe, Sometimes it's a wooden axe, it can be a stone axe as well. So no iron axes, because we are on the surface and that's consistent with the rest of the data pack that way. But the higher tier the axe is, the more likely it is to be enchanted, and the better the enchantment is. So these gold axes are actually really good. You already saw that with Drowned, but for zombies, if they spawn with iron shovels, those will be replaced with different pickaxes in caves and in the Badlands biomes as well. They have a chance to have enchantments as everything else, but it's all tiered. So the better the tier of the tool, the more likely it is to be enchanted, and the better the enchantments themselves. I simplified it from the other rules of the armor and equipment for swords and spears. Those are much more complex. These ones with pickaxes and axes are more simplified, but I think that's perfectly fine for these specific applications. In your regular stone caves, they're going to have slightly better equipment than on the surface, obviously, and pickaxes, as I mentioned earlier. So these guys have a chance to be really decked out. That's vanilla, that's not mob tweaks. The deeper we go, as I said, the more likely they are to have really good equipment, and these guys will become an actual challenge at this point. They will start spawning with diamond equipment, including diamond spears and swords, so these guys will become an actual challenge, and there are guarding really good resources here. We have iron, we have a lot of gold, we have diamonds obviously, so I think it really works for this part of the world to have much stronger enemies. Something I didn't mention that much is the armor. The armor basically follows more or less the same rules as the weapons, except the armor has lower chances to be equipped. So when for these you have like 35, 25, 15, 5% chance for the weapons to be changed. For the armor it's like 20, 15, 10, 5% chance. I just thought that the armor would be better if it was less likely to be equipped than the weapons, but you can already see this is already making the situation way dicier than it would be in regular vanilla. Alright, I'm just entertained by this friendly fire going on right here. That's what happens sometimes with spears, because they're not so easy to aim to hit exactly what you want to hit. So yeah, it's really fun to watch. And the skeletons, pretty much the same rules, but only in terms of armor. So they don't follow those rules when it comes to weapons, because they all have regular weapons, their bows. I did not change those, only the armor. So here's a parched, and it's going to be the exact same story with like a skeleton, and even wither skeletons have this same system. So even though they cannot spawn in the overworld, this is what they would have. There's one more specific thing I want to show you about the skeletons though, and we need to go to the Nether to see that. Here we are in the Nether, and let's spawn a few parched mobs, and you will see that they never get copper equipment in the Nether. Instead of copper, they will have gold equipment, so it's a bit more represented here in the Nether than in the overworld, and I think that makes a lot of sense. So even though we don't have a lot of gold going on in the overworld, we have it here. This applies to the regular skeletons which do spawn in the Nether. One more thing that's worth noting is that they can sometimes spawn with full copper equipment or just copper equipment in general in vanilla. Let me show you what happens when they spawn with copper equipment. It's going to change to gold equipment, and that's how it basically works for the skeleton mobs, and that's basically it for the overworld mobs and all the undead ones. Now let me show you what happens with the piglins, because I think I've added some pretty interesting changes to these guys as well. The zombified piglins and the regular piglins now have a 1 in 3 chance or so of having pickaxes instead of their regular equipment. They still have crossbows and swords as they did before, but they also have a chance to get pickaxes now. That guy has a pickaxe, for example, and those are enchanted with the same vanilla chance that the regular equipment has. So it's not the same as mob tweaks. The baby piglins can now have a chance to spawn with golden pickaxes in the Nether wastes, implying child labor, which I think is really on par and on theme with the piglins, even though it's like my own lore, but I think it really fits. Now in the Crimson Forest, it's a tiny bit of a different story actually. So these guys will spawn with hoes instead, including the baby regular piglins, of course. But the adults spawn with axes, so it implies that the adults are obviously equipped to gather planks, and the children are more supplementary because they're probably not strong enough, so they're just clearing up the foliage. That's the implication of the spawning changes, and obviously it also works that way with the regular ziglins as well, not just the piglins. I maintained the spear chance because it's pretty low, so I made sure that the spears do not get replaced in the system. So I think it's a really great set of features that kind of changes the way that some of the mobs work in different environments, just makes the world feel more realistic, and it really works in Minecraft in my opinion. But that's not even it. I have more changes to the Nether that you might find really interesting. So the Piglin Brute now has a chance to spawn with a spear instead of an axe, and a very tiny chance to spawn with a sword, just as a lucky thing. So you will have an easier brute to fight with a sword than with the axe, but it's like a small 5% chance. That'll very rarely happen. These guys with the spears are more likely, but not too likely. Most of them still have axes, but they have a decent chance to have a spear. These guys are actually really vicious. Let me show you in survival. I have brought 4 on all of these items except the boots and the chest plate, but it's pretty good because I still have iron and netherite equipment. So let me see. And as you can see, he has a longer reach than a regular Piglin Brute because of his spear. I have a really high level spear here. Let me try again with a unenchanted diamond spear just to show you the difference. And I'm pretty good at this game overall, but I'm not perfect. I think I'll be a decent representation for like an average good player. I'm not expecting new players to play with data packs. Logically, it makes sense that people who are more familiar with vanilla Minecraft are going to play with data packs, so they have more experience and they want more out of their game. At that point, that they start delving into community created content to add to the game, which makes all the other changes with additional armor and weapons more balanced in my opinion towards the kind of player that's going to be experiencing these changes. Now obviously I'm using the spear, so I'm not using a shield, but that's another reason why I added these features, is because it adds a whole new dimension to a mob that already exists. Obviously you still have the base experience that you have with Piglin Brutes with the axes, that's going to be the exact same, but you also have a little bit of a different experience with these ones, for example, and the ones with spears obviously. But don't get it twisted, it's not too different. It's still the same mob, still the same way it attacks, the same patrolling behavior, the same amount of health, the same amount of damage, the same amount of speed, but just a tiny bit of variation to make your game more interesting, so you get more out of the same mob while not erasing that mob's identity. And that's what I love about this update. Now let me show you the final set of changes that I added to this part of the pack before we end the video. The last set of changes in this category for the update is for the raider mobs, mainly the Vexes. Before I show you the Vexes though, I just want to say, without having to show you, that the Vindicators that spawn in riding Ravagers will have spears instead of axes because they give them longer reach. On their own with the axes, the Vindicators are much better than with spears because they do not really know how to use the spears properly. And if they stand right next to you with a spear, since spears have a minimum reach that other weapons do not have, they just kind of stand there. So it doesn't really work very well. But in the context of them riding Ravagers, it really works well because they can actually reach you and be effective on Ravager back. Because the Ravagers themselves, their AI is kind of neutered when they are being ridden. So when they're on their own, they are very dangerous. But when another mob is riding them, it's really advantageous to fight the Ravager first and then kill the rider. Because when it's ridden, the Ravager is less effective. So to counteract that, I gave spears to the Vindicators that ride them to make them actually a big threat. Now let's get to the Vexes, and that's the last thing I added, if I'm not mistaken anything. I haven't documented every single change that I made so far. There's just so much going on in this system. I'm really proud of the detail and the amount of variety that it offers. I think it's really fun. But let's get to the Vexes. They have a pretty high chance to spawn with spears now instead of swords, and a very tiny chance, about 5% I think, or a 10% chance to spawn with axes. The reason the chance is very small is because it's obviously extremely strong, but like I said, I just wanted to add a lot more variety to the mob, so having a rare chance to have an axe wielding Vex is going to be like an oh shit moment. It's going to be adding a lot to the raid experience in my opinion. Let me try to take on a spear wielding Vex, and as you can see, the difference is obviously they can reach you further, so they're a bit more dangerous. So when a regular Vex would miss, these guys are more likely to actually land a hit on you. And as you can hear, these guys have lunge. That's something I added specifically for the Vex. They have about a 40% chance, I think, to have lunge 1, and I think a 1 in 3 chance to have lunge 2, and a small 25% chance of having lunge 3. So that actually changes how you fight Vexes a bit, because instead of just staying in front of you, they go through you. And they kind of can, as you can see, chain attacks that way. It's frequent enough to make a difference. As you can see, the guy has chaining attacks because he has lunge. I think he has lunge 3 or something. So he's actually really effective with it. It adds a lot of cool behavior specifically to this kind of mob. Now, there are more things in this update. Particularly, there's this little creature that you've already seen before. It's a baby Nautilus, and I'm going to make a whole separate video about these guys. I also did a bunch of changes to the regular Nautilus and the regular zombie Nautilus, so that's going to be lots of fun. Stay tuned for the next video to see all of that stuff. But that's going to be it for this part of the next mob tweaks update. I am looking for feedback on this because I have one more idea that I wanted to share with you before we end the video. Since the Nether doesn't go below y=0, the wither skeletons and the regular skeletons in the Nether cannot have the really strong equipment that they can have in the deep slate layer of the overworld caves. So to give them a chance to have that equipment, I'm considering making this a passive effect of Bad Omen. In the fortress, the wither skeletons and the regular skeletons, and maybe even places around you, can recognize that and get stronger. So not only will it give them a chance to equip this really strong equipment, like they do in the overworld that has diamond stuff on it, by the way, and better enchantments, and a higher chance to get enchantments in general, like I stated earlier. But the Wither Skeletons will also have a higher chance to drop the Wither Skeleton Skull. It's similar to the balancing that I did with the Drowned, when they have a higher chance to drop their Tridents, and it's an additional thing. You will increase the challenge, and that challenge will increase the reward. The more challenge there is, the better the reward should be, obviously. It's going to make farming for the Wither Skulls more interesting and less tedious. Now, it's not going to be a custom effect per se. It's not going to be like a whole thing involving a complete revamp of how the fortresses work. It's just going to be like a tiny gameplay feature in a different data pack or in a different mod. I would make this a whole other separate thing for the Nether Fortress experience. But in this data pack, it could be just like a tiny addition that improves vanilla. So let me know what you think about that in the comments. Join the Discord for more frequent updates, and I post a lot of screenshots there, so you can see my development more or less in real time without having to wait for videos. And don't forget to smash subscribe, ring my bell, and as always, stay. Let's spawn if you drawn. Let's spawn if you drawn. What the fuck?